Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if you really truly have free will, or are we all just puppets of destiny? This is a huge question that philosophers and scientists have wrestled with for ages. And our guest reviewer, Ariella Reynolds and Joachim Krueger, take a look at a book that dives deep into this. It is by a physicist and hedge fund founder named Samir Varma. He's got a really interesting take. Okay, so Varma's big idea is to split free will into two categories, theoretical free will, or FWIT, and practical free will, or FWIP. Theoretical free will, he says, is the idea that you could have, at any given moment, chosen to do something completely different, regardless of all the stuff that led up to that moment. Think of it like this. Could you have chosen to eat broccoli instead of that donut, even if every single atom in the universe and every single experience you've ever had was exactly the same? Varma's answer is a big fat no. He argues, based on our current understanding of physics, that everything is determined by cause and effect. He points to physics, saying that the universe operates on predictable laws, even quantum physics, which can seem random, he argues, isn't truly random in a way that would give us free will. It is more like unpredictability, not a lack of cause. But here is where it gets interesting. He says we do have practical free will. What does that mean? It means that for all intents and purposes, our behavior is often unpredictable, both to ourselves and to others, because we can't possibly know all the tiny little causes and conditions that lead to our actions. It feels like we're making free choices. This distinction is key to unlocking the whole free will debate, which can get super stuck. Has basically saying theoretical free will is an illusion, but practical free will is what we actually experience and what actually matters for navigating our lives. So, if everything is predetermined, there is no wiggle room for that. Could have done otherwise theoretical freedom. It is like a story that is already written. But the thing is, we don't have a supercomputer in our heads that knows every single atom, every single influence, every single past event. We don't have perfect information. So, when you say, I chose to eat this pizza, Varma would say you are expressing your practical understanding of how the world works, but also your lack of knowledge about all the tiny deterministic causes that led you to that choice. This idea that perfect prediction is impossible is captured by a really cool concept he uses called computational irreducibility. Computational irreducibility means that in order to figure out what will happen, you have to actually do it. You can't just calculate it beforehand. Think of simulating the weather for the next month. You can't just crunch numbers and get a perfect forecast. You have to run the simulation step by step. And for complex systems like human behavior, it's the same deal. So after you eat that donut and feel a bit guilty, you can look back and say, oh, I was hungry, I saw it, it smelled good. And that makes sense. But predicting that exact moment, with all the tiny biological and environmental nudges, is practically impossible. Varma doesn't just pull this out of thin air, he draws from physics, computer science, and other fields. He explains complex ideas really well, making them accessible. He talks about things like chaos theory, where small changes can have huge, unpredictable effects, and Gödel's theorems, which show limits to what we can prove mathematically. What's also great about Varma's approach, according to the reviewers, is his compassion. He knows people have strong ideas about free will, and instead of just dismissing them, he explains why they might be understandable from a practical point of view. He doesn't attack the person, just the idea if he thinks it is theoretically wrong. This is like, hey, I get why you think that, and from your perspective it makes sense. But from a deeper scientific perspective, here is what's going on. Scroll Varma never pontificates, which is a prudent attitude in a book that teaches as much as it advances an argument. And he is not arrogant about it. He uses real world examples and even humor to make his points. So he'll talk about the fundamental laws of physics, but then immediately connect it to why predicting Supreme Court decisions or even viral tweets is so incredibly hard. It's that gap between the underlying deterministic rules and the complex, unpredictable outcomes. He even uses traffic jams as an analogy. We all know how frustrating traffic can be, and it's a perfect example of a complex system where individual drivers are following simple rules. But the overall behavior of the jam is incredibly hard to predict and control. Now, the reviewers do point out that Varma packs a lot of information into this book. Sometimes it can feel a bit overwhelming with all the different topics he covers in a single chapter. They mention one chapter covering economics, DNA, Bell's theorem, and more. That's a lot to digest. A key criticism is that Varma spends a lot of time explaining the theory behind why we don't have theoretical free will, but he doesn't spend quite enough time exploring the practical consequences of that idea. He dives deep into the why of determinism, but then kind of skims over the so what. For example, he talks about AI and the future, and how to deal with regret, which are important, but the reviewers felt some of these sections, like predicting the future and why does evil exist, could have used more depth. There are a couple of minor inaccuracies pointed out too. For instance, he conflates different beliefs about God, and he makes a claim about our brains not releasing dopamine from imagined rewards, which research shows isn't quite right. These are small points, but they suggest the book could have benefited from a bit more careful fact-checking. Samir Varma relaxes some of his rigor when he makes sweeping claims on the basis of cherry-picked pieces of evidence. Sometimes, Varma seems to jump to big conclusions based on limited evidence. He might use one quote to make a grand statement about death, or only briefly touch on whether fruit flies have free will. It's like Hess chasing these huge philosophical questions but doesn't always have the space to fully explore them. In essence, Varma's book seeks to offer a physics-based computational explanation for the human experience. So, what's the takeaway from all this? Varma's book tries to give us a scientific, computational way to understand our lives and choices. Despite its critical distinction between FWIT and FWIP, it does not offer a new psychological framework for decision-making. Instead, Varma echoes existentialism in his concluding chapter, claiming that his FWIT-FWIP dichotomy reveals that our life's meaning means no more and no less than what we choose it to mean. He doesn't offer a totally new way to think about how we make decisions day to day. Instead, in the end, he circles back to a kind of existentialist idea: if we don't have theoretical free will, then the meaning of our lives is whatever we decide it is. That is pretty empowering, right? Even with its flaws, the reviewers found the book to be incredibly insightful, thought-provoking, and enjoyable. It's definitely a book that makes you think about your own place in the universe. So, what do I think? I love Varma's distinction between theoretical and practical free will. It feels like a really smart way to cut through the endless philosophical debate. We don't have that magical, undetermined free will that some people imagine, but our lives are certainly filled with choices that feel real and meaningful because we can't predict every outcome. The idea of computational irreducibility is fascinating. It explains why the world is so complex and why predicting the future is so hard, even if the underlying rules are simple. The main critique that Varma might have spent too much time on the theory and not enough on the practical implications is definitely something to consider. But honestly, exploring why we might not have theoretical free will is a huge intellectual journey in itself. It forces us to confront our place in the universe and how we create meaning. Future research could definitely delve deeper into the practical implications. How does believing or not believing in theoretical free will actually affect our behavior, our legal systems, our relationships? And can we build AI that truly understands and navigates this practical free will concept? These are the kinds of questions that keep me up at night. What are your thoughts on free will? Do you think we have it, or are we just playing out a script? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you found it interesting. And subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more deep dives into the science of the mind and the universe. See you next time!